Awesome. Well, really excited for this training session and a lot of appreciation to folks that have made this happen. And so Michelle and a few others for coordinating it. And then this is part of a broader partnership that we've had with AMAA with MIPA down in the US. And so Heather Graham, who just joined, has helped facilitate a lot of this and to bring Keith and Kent to help not only us as performing ensembles, but now in the topic of this meeting, which is helping to give some training and framework to our judging community, just in terms of a little bit of overview and intro to all this concept. So we've been working to help to stand up and mature our circuit here in Alberta. We've had marching arts up here for a long time, but the idea of sort of formalizing it into a circuit is a relatively new one to us. And so our goal is really to facilitate, great events up here for not only our local groups, but our stretch goal is also to entice other groups to come to our area of the world and to perform with us and potentially compete with us. And so that's our goal in trying to essentially upskill everything that we're doing up here. And so over the last 2 years, essentially, you've been trying to upskill like the logistics, the production of shows, the visibility of the circuit. And something that has been a key focus this year is helping to increase the training and learning in our judging community. Because we're on an island a little bit, like we rely a lot on homegrown judges in this community. And so we see that learning is going to be a key piece. Learning and education is going to be a key piece of having a strong, vibrant judging pool up here in Canada and Alberta specifically. And so that's one of the reasons why this was such a great endeavor for us to embark on. And a lot of thanks to Heather, Keith, and Kent for being a part of that. So that's just a little bit of preamble. And the goal here was to turn it over to Keith and Kent and Heather, and they have prepared some materials that can help start to guide us with a bit of a framework. And then logically, I think that would work into some question and answers as well. So that is just setting the stage a bit. In terms of some introductions for everyone on the call, Keith is the color guard judge coordinator for the MIPA circuit, but Keith, I'm aware of your long history across many other areas as well, but that's how you join us today. And then Kent is winds and percussion judging coordinator at the Atlantic Indoor Circuit. And so two very qualified and experienced folks who organize this and do this at scale, which I think is really cool. And so the opportunity for us to talk to people that do this on, I was going to say a daily basis, but maybe it's even on an hourly basis, is really enticing to us. And so with that, I would love to turn it over to you, probably, Keith.
Thank you. Did you receive the training document that our circuit is using this year for judges? If so, please feel free to share it with everybody present. And if not, we'll send it to you. It walks, in fact, I just sent it to our first round of judges. We begin our season on Saturday. And since they're adults, instead of me lecturing at them on a Zoom call, we have a presentation that they can review. And so all your judges can review it as well. And it walks everyone through the expectations that our circuit has for judging. And so we won't talk about things like social media management, although that is important. Let me just go through a couple basics, and Kent, feel free to jump in at any time. Let's talk about commentary first. The commentary that judges provide for the units during the show is designed to be scoring significant. If you saw the recording from last Wednesday, we did have a brief conversation about this, but the judges provide commentary using the words of the sheet and their own extemporaneous comments based on their experience relative to what they're seeing, to provide language that fits into a box descriptor on the sheet. What we say leads us to a score. That's why we have to keep talking. And by the end of the performance, the judge should have a good idea of where to score the unit on the sheet because of what they've said about the unit during the performance. So if you have questions.
Commentary drives scoring, and that can't be the end of the process. I think it's fantastic that you have what you call homegrown judges. We've done the same in AIA, and now 6 of them are WGI judges. So we're thrilled that we have a process that creates a pipeline to a higher level, and you're doing the same. Now that WGI's training has gone away, it is on the circuit level where we can manage that most effectively. I'm really proud that other circuits have taken the lead in that too.
So as we go through our speaking process that creates scoring significant commentary, we have to be well enough aware of the sheets so that we can create a language. I have my own cheat sheet that I created for myself that has buzzwords on it. In fact, Kent sent me one that a friend of ours created recently that is super helpful. Every one of us has a unique process, and we all bring something different to the judging experience. That's what makes each of us valuable, is we all have a degree of experience, and we all have something to draw on so that we can contextualize what we're seeing. Don't be afraid to make your own tools. You don't have to use circuit driven tools only, or the color bloom. Kent, do you have one? I know you had it a couple of minutes ago. Yeah, there's the WGI approved color bloom, and it is a tool. Nothing more, just a tool, so that we can use language that is appropriate for the level and quality of performance that we're seeing. I've got one that Kent just sent me tonight. It's got colors top to bottom with descriptive words attached in a spectrum of quality from super good to far less good. But this, the sheet gives me much better language than that. And there's always a growth process we're engaged in where we try to further develop our own language. I recently started judging equipment. Kent has too, right? Yeah, we both decided in the last couple of years we can do more and will. And I know that we've both created our own tools, our reference sheet for our judging experience. Don't be afraid to create your own.
That has changed recently for both of us as we branch out into other captions. We have both begun judging equipment, which is something relatively new, and it's very eye-opening. I do have a question that, to whom are you accountable? Who listens to your tapes? Who gives feedback on your process? Because we all need editors. As a composer, I was a composer for the United States Air Force Band and hornist and drum major for 23 years. I don't just write the music and give to somebody. Everybody needs an editor. Don't fall in love with your own work, is my best advice. So to whom are we accountable in commentary?
Is there anyone on the call who has a training partner who listens to their commentary and provides suggestions?
So more than likely, that's going to be me this year.
Good. I'm glad that there is someone who's identifiable. But, that process that the circuit has, I know that Heather and I are both on the review committee for our circuit. So if a certain score is achieved, we review the unit for possible promotion. But in addition to that, I will listen to a minimum of 3 taped commentaries for every judge every week. And that's not strange for me. I'm the guy who listens to everyone. I really enjoy listening to other people's taped commentary. And so, and listen, like when I drive home from Dayton this weekend, I have 5 hours in the car, and I'm going to listen to a lot of taped commentary. And these are people I know and people I trust, and that's why I bring them into the circuit. But not only am I getting better, but I'll provide suggestions for them as well, even if they're not coming back to our circuit. We're all beholden to one another, and it's in our best interest to have training partners. Find someone for the judging community in your circuit. Find someone else. It doesn't even have to be from your circuit. If you know other judges somewhere else in the United States, share taped commentary with them, provide feedback. I know Kent and I talk about this stuff constantly, and we have another training partner, Austin Green from North Carolina, who is primarily a WGI percussion guy. But we all talk about process at least every other day. And so I would encourage you to partner up to get better.
It's true that we have a wide variety of experience, not just the three of us that train together, but all of you as well. Some of you may be administrators in your day job. That brings a level of professionalism. That's maybe somebody who, professional musician like me, we were basically paid children on a bus when we traveled. We were unsupervised. What we are, performing artists can be like that. All of us have different tools we can bring. I know a guy who is a professional sculptor. I know a guy who's a respiratory therapist, who is a brass judge. Everybody has a unique take on that. Who you are as a person can help you in your judging process. You don't have to be somebody who spins every day. You don't have to be somebody who analyzes drill or tunes an ensemble. We all have unique skills, and share that with the people you talk to. Keith knows a guy who's a glass blower.
The artist in residence at the Corning Museum of Glass, and his opinion about the design of color guard shows is informed by his opinion about the design of glassworks. And so it's great to have a variety of opinions available. So, and no matter what you do, your opinion is valuable because no one else knows what you know. So at any point, jump in and ask a question. But as judges, we go through a process of impression, analysis, and comparison. We gain, in fact, I've started telling I teach AP, Advanced Placement U.S. History 5 times a day, and I tell my students that that's the process I go through when I grade their essays, that I get an impression about how skilled the product is, and then I analyze what they've done, and then I compare it to the rubric, to the standards. And that's what we do. That's the official process of WGI, impression, analysis, comparison. And so we take it all in over time as we watch color guard shows. We analyze not only what they're doing, but how well they're doing it. In fact, we consider the success of multiple simultaneous responsibilities. If at any point you're overwhelmed watching a color guard show about what to talk about, everyone is. The amount of information that a color guard judge has to, or winds or percussion, has to process in a short period of time is astonishing. And we don't catch everything. That's one of the reasons we have critique, is so the unit can explain what they hoped the judge would see and can look for in the following viewing, maybe in a week or two.
I find it hard to know what you know. So we're giving the boilerplate information here. So how long has your circuit been active? About how many years has your judge has been doing this gig? And if you're from somewhere else doing it, that's great.
The circuit has really only started to formalize in the last few years. I would say, years before that, it's been on the backs of just a few people sort of keeping shows going. But in the interest of maybe you, Kent, and Keith getting a flavor of folks, maybe I'll call on a few. And so maybe first, Rochelle.
Oh, I was just gonna mention that historically, the shows, there's the same shows every season, but from a judging perspective, it's kind of like, they would just kind of pick, anybody that would have an interest in saying anything, but the commentary would be lacking. It would be like, woo, that's so good. Wow. Wow. And so you'd listen to tape after tape after tape of that type of commentary with very few tapes over the many, many years that actually provided anything that you could take to consider or use as improving your own process. And so, yeah.
That's an excellent comment. And I will admit that Kent and I largely started judging because we were unsatisfied with the quality of the judging we were receiving. And does bitterness drive our professional development? Absolutely. Sure. There, in fact, one of the things we listen for when we listen to other people's commentary are moments where we can provide assistance, not angrily, not in a mean way, but as suggestions for all of us to get better. Our goal is to have the kids succeed. Really, we're the biggest fans of the students. We love what they do. We want to give back to the community that has given so much to us. And we all want the performers to get better. And to do that, the judging community has to continue to develop in a positive way. And that requires everybody. And so that's one of the reasons Ken and I have found ourselves in the roles of judge coordinators, the people who listen to commentary and then provide the kind of feedback that everyone needs to get better. So if you're judging for the circuit, be aware that we engage in a language of specificity. We have to say what we're seeing. We have to describe where it is on the floor, and we have to describe to what degree is it succeeding. And in the moment, when you're attempting to construct a sentence with all of those things, it is a lot. And it's easy to say, wow, but there is an academic requirement to it. And it doesn't happen randomly. It requires preparation. In fact, for several years, when I started judging for WGI, I actually spent hours every week writing out sentences, watching taped shows, and pausing and thinking, what would be appropriate to say here? I have to admit, I was not the best judge when I started for WGI. I was good enough, but they wanted me to get better. And so I had homework every week given to me by the WGI person who was in charge of me. And it felt a little like probation, but it was a ton of work, probably 5 hours a week. So here's a suggestion so that you can understand where you are in your developmental process. And Kent and I both do this at least once per season. From this weekend, when I judge in Dayton, Ohio, I will select one of my commentaries and I will transpose it. I will type it into a Word document. And then I will dissect every sentence and try to figure out how many comments were positive, how many comments were negative, and how many of the bullet points on the sheet did I address.
Not only that, but balance and commentary is not limited to positive and negative. It's the what and the how, because we're judging two shows at once. The content and the achievement, whatever the words are on different captions. GE certainly has different words for that, but it's the same concept. The what and the how. And all of our sheets judge that simultaneously. So we have to balance that commentary extemporaneously when we're speaking.
So speaking of that, while we engage in that extemporaneous commentary, we have a couple of requirements that the judging community has. Our scoring priorities in order are ranking, profiling, spread management, and rating. Kent, would you talk about ranking for a minute?
Ranking is the least compelling thing to do. We want to give the units more than just an idea of where they stand with the other teams. We want to tell a story with our numbers. That's why profiling is so important these days. The distance between your what number and another team's what number is a type of profile. The distance between your what number and your how number is a profile. And there are limits to how far you can go above or below each number.
It's probably not a shock that I agree with what he's saying. Ranking is putting them in order, and everyone wants to get the groups in the right order.
It's not the most important. And if you do your job in the other three, that's simply a product.
Yeah, the ranking will take care of itself if you are using the system in a way that profiles appropriately, has distance between the groups that is appropriate, and you have rated them relative to the criteria appropriately.
And all of that starts with your commentary. And you have to be aware as the tape progresses, whether you're using words like sometimes, frequently, always, whether it's the what, whether it's the how. So you know where that number is going to lie based on what you've said.
We're describing a process almost in reverse. Like the way we're talking about it to you is actually walking backwards. I would argue that our most valuable skill that we bring to the judging process is recognition. We have to be able to recognize what the units are doing in order to talk about it meaningfully in a way that is scoring significant so that we can achieve our goals of rank, profile, spread, and rating.
It may be true that the greatest skill we bring to this activity is our autism because we're hyper-focused on it. Every day. This is an everyday thing for us.
Can I just ask a question on that then? Just because that's kind of how I personally see how it should go, but we've had many conversations over various years where other judges feel like, if such and such group, that the group that has the highest score gets, let's say, an 80, that no matter what, the next group should be within, 2 points.
Well, now
But it doesn't line up when you actually look at the words on the scoring sheets. If you're saying sometimes or rarely or occasionally or frequently, that scoring is quite that gap can be quite large.
Yeah, I understand that we judge gradations of effort, and our efforts are also in a gradation. Keith, would you talk about the value of a 10th?
Sure. First, let me say I love the word gradations. As judges, that like Kent and I are very much design analysis people, and we consider gradations of weight, space, time, and flow. And it's important that that skill of recognition of various levels of writing and performing be used in both the micro, in the subcaptions, and in the macro of that distance between units like you described in a second ago. So the question was about the value of a 10th. A 10th is important to us in the subcaptions. The subcaptions are where we find the distance between groups to be meaningful on the sheets, because 0 to 0.3 tenths, 0 to 3 tenths in a subcaption are slight differences. If, as a judge, you've decided that the vocabulary number on equipment is 2 tenths away from two different groups, you're saying that the next time they compete against one another, it could go the other way. The performance could be varied in such a way that either of those groups could win that one in that subcaption. If you suggest that the difference is 4 tenths to 6 tenths, then they have moderate differences that are unlikely to change, but a week of instruction might make the difference. If you indicate that 7 to 9 tenths, 7 tenths to a full point are separate a unit in a subcaption, those are significant differences. And there would have to be something changing in either the way they perform or what they're performing in order to make a difference in their ranking. And so be aware that what we care about most is that distance between units in the subcaptions. We don't produce an overall number and then work backwards. We judge two separate contests simultaneously in the what, and we judge that second contest in the how.
I would tell those people you mentioned that they should listen to the commentary and find out what words have been used. And if the judge is not arriving at that number or that third of a box, then it's a training issue for the judge.
And in my past, there have been a few times where a unit comes into critique and says, well, on the tape, here's where you use these words, and yet here's what score you gave us. And I'll just admit it, that I didn't do my job, because I provided a commentary that indicated a score and you didn't receive that score. That's on me. And I need to engage in a degree of self-reflection about why that happened. And then I need to take that into account next time I see the unit. Either I said something wrong or I didn't score it appropriately. And so
Winter Guard is a tough place to judge because the transparency is absolute. BOA, you don't know what your subcaptions are against other bands. There's no ordinals on the recap. They hide a lot of that stuff because with, 60 teams, of course, you're going to tie some subcaptions. DCI moves at a glacial pace to move teams from one place to another for a lot of crazy reasons. But WGI, completely transparent. Your caption managers can listen to your tapes. The units listen to your tapes, and you get that feedback from two places, from the top, from your boss, and from the bottom, from the unit. And you're part of that information pipeline to the teams. It starts with the rule book, the caption philosophies. If you haven't read those, that's the first place to start. So you can use the language of the sheet. If you're judging design analysis and you don't use the word logic, you're probably missing something.
So I want to go on with the value of a tenth for a minute. We have some scoring guidelines that are given to us from WGI, and I've gone back and forth over it, and I really like having boundaries. I like guidelines because they become meaningful because everyone has those same guidelines. We're told that we, as judges, we may put a unit's performance under the design by a full point. If there is a relationship between what they are doing and how they are doing it, and if they are given a certain design and performing it very poorly, then that will decrease the design number. It is possible that the performance can pull down the design number. And so if you find that you want to give a certain scoring range to the design, but the performers don't have any idea how to bring that to life, it may be necessary to reduce the design number. On the other end, we could put the performers over the design by up to 4/10. And it would be a rare occurrence to go beyond that guideline. But let's talk about some reasons why a judge might profile a unit with the performance over the design, because that has in the past been seen as a negative thing. Like a long time ago, judges would do that to indicate that this is as far as you're going to go. This is as clean as you're going to get, that you have no room for growth. And it was an alarm bell that would go off when we saw that happen. That's not true anymore. I can put the performers over the unit for no other reason that they had a great show. If I see a unit that had a great show and I simply want to reward the performers, I can. And that's wonderful. And I will often do so. If I find that the design is underdeveloped, that the transitions are pedestrian, and the performers have a solid understanding of what they're doing, I might put the performers over the book, knowing that the transitions have not yet been developed. It's not an insult. It's just where the unit is in their developmental process. I can do it if, like early season, if there's just not much show there, and yet if some unit cleans before they move on, it is likely early season that you will find a reason to put the performers over the design. Any questions about that? That's a big point for me this year, to communicate to the judges in the Mideast Performance Association that we need to have that tool in our toolbox, because it varies the relationship of the units to one another. If you find that all of the units that you score end up with the same ordinal in each subcaption, 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, 4-4, you've probably not judged 2 shows as you're paid to do. You've probably judged one subcaption.
It's also true that if the Watt number is always 2/10 above, or the Watt number is 2/10 above the How number all the way down the sheet, the same is true. The profile can be inverted, and honestly, that shows maturity of a judge, that you're more discerning if you're able to read profiles both above and below the Watt and the How, and make them equal. I did a numbers analysis for everybody who judged for the Atlantic Indoor Association last year, and that is, we have 215 units from DC to North Carolina, and it's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of people, but it really opened my eyes to who is able to profile, and every one of them at the top is a WGI judge that we brought in. They're just better trained than everyone.
Kent and I like to know who's doing what. We know who's profiling appropriately, and we do this analysis for all the judges in our circuits. And last year, only one of the judges in MIPA never profiled the performers over the design, and that means that judge has a limited range of skills in recognition of how the subcaptions work together. And so I'm going to have a conversation before that person judges for our circuit this year. But what I am committed to is growth. And so that person is coming back to our circuit because someone at one point in my past dragged me through the process and supported me along the way. And I know Kent and I are both committed to that growth process. If there's a time where you think, I don't know, I just didn't do a great job, and am I really cut out for this? Look, if you sat in that seat and did it, you are absolutely cut out for it. The challenge now is to understand the vulnerabilities that you have and work on them. Kent and I still do that. That's why we talk about this stuff literally every time we speak.
Can I ask a question on that then?
We want you to ask a lot of questions.
So there's been times where hopefully I'm following this conversation right, but where I have, let's say like an A class group, for example, where we want them to be, oh gosh, I'm kind of out of the loop on what we're doing here, but we want them to be performing at a higher level than the challenge of the content. Does that make sense?
Well, that's always goes back to training.
Yeah.
We can talk about training.
We want them to focus on their training. And so some of these groups will come out and thanks, Rexy. You can tell that they have, spent a lot of time on their training, but the content of what their design or their show design is lacking. Like they're very strong, they come out, they're clean, they're doing everything that they've been asked for, but you kind of like want them to be able to do more, but because of the level that they've chosen to compete in, it seems to be like that's appropriate. Is it okay in those times to say like your performers are doing everything they need to do? Like, can you do more on the design?
We have a way to say that with the numbers.
Okay.
You don't have to necessarily say that on the tape commentary. You can recognize how wonderful the performers are. And we have words like moderate, pedestrian, average to describe the design. And when you want to make a comment about the distinction between those two things, you can put the number for the performers over the number for the design.
The word we're looking for is compatibility. If what they have done is masterful, and they're not challenged at all, you could say that in a critique, certainly, but we value every part of the design independent from what we like and what is our experience. We have to take their show as it is and only judge what's there and not what we think it can be. We can have no expectation at the beginning of a tape or at the end of a tape. The show is what it is.
One of our responsibilities is to consider that compatibility between the written work and the training. And one of the reasons is safety. Safety is a big issue this year for Winter Guard International, and we are considering whether the performers are trained to a degree that is compatible with the expectations of the written work. And early season, there may be questions about that. But in the middle of the season, the design team should, and the instructional staff should have a good understanding of where they can get the performers relative to the expectations. And so those comments may be more valid in the early season. If you find in the late season that the performers are trained to a wonderful degree above the written work, say so with the numbers.
Okay, then just one other question on that. So let's say you're judging show, multiple shows in a row. And I understand you say that with the numbers. Would you then, if 2 weeks have gone by and the performers are still doing everything that they're expected to be doing, their number may go up, but if the design hasn't shifted at all, would that number still stay the same
Well,
based on the words that you're using?
like he said, that there is a performance that can drag down a composition number. There's also a performance number that can drag up that composition number, right? It works both ways. But the truth is, once I judge a show, that number's gone. It doesn't exist in my mind anymore. I will not look at what I've given the previous. Every show is a different show because there's different lighting, different space, different competition, different judges. We were in a different row. Sometimes we're in a tiny little venue. All of that is so different, you can't remember the number you gave last year. We don't judge in a linear fashion. Every show is the show of the day.
You haven't been to Coal City, Illinois, and I don't recommend it. They only no shit. It's just a small town that 8 rows of bleachers. And I was in the 8th row, which is where the equipment judge should sit, and I was judging general effect. And I saw a unit for the second consecutive week, a giant venue in the previous week and the tiniest venue in the second week. And the number I gave shifted by a full point, not because the performers were different, but because my experience was different. The show dynamics really are meaningful. There are some things I simply could not perceive from the 8th row that I was expected to see on general effect. So those numbers can change for so many different reasons.
Yeah, I think that's probably like how once I've done something, it's gone. But again, historically in our, what we have done is that one of the tabulators, somebody prints out the scores from last week, and then there's a conversation of every group every week should be going up.
Now this is
for me, like, that's always been hard to I've never judged this group and they were given, this score. How am I supposed to say that their score is going up if this is a completely different experience for myself?
You don't, because that's not your job. Now this is an issue of training for your staffs. Somebody has to tell them that every show is its own show, that the concept of your scores going up each week doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's now over the course of the season, that is likely true. But when you pick 2 points on your developmental graph, it could be up or down. Like, that's trend data. That's true for trend data. It's not true for 2 points.
What those staffs are asking you to do is create an expectation of greater success. And we don't do that.
Yeah. Although I applaud them for being advocates for their performers. Good. That's nice. That's a good try.
Can I speak up for a second, Keith and Kent? So Rochelle, one thing that actually should be being looked at versus the scores is the ranking and the rating. Seeing that they're still in the same place that they were the week before, which means both groups could have gone up in quality, but the judges saw it differently, like Kent was saying, from the 8 rows. That's the important part that instructors should be looking at versus the scores.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I do want to mention just one thing in our nice little tiny but growing circuit is that the rule of the tenths are really hard to apply with us because we're literally only judging maybe 3 or 4 groups in each division. And so a lot of times the spread is a lot bigger than just tenths, right? And that's kind of what we're dealing with, if that makes any sense, right? Like we're not dealing with 74.1s versus 74.2s. We're dealing with like 74.1s to, you know, the next group might be 80.1 in the same division, right? So I'm just trying to calculate in my mind how the rule of tens would apply in our situation.
Well, if you find significant differences between the units, you have to place those units in the appropriate spot on the sheet based on the language that you used when adjudicating them. And I'll admit, I've wanted to be kind to units. I find that, you know, with competition suite at the end of a round, I can look at the group that's in the bottom and ask, how bottom does this have to be? You know, and raise it up a bit artificially. We do get into a little bit of a trap there, in that when all of the units come together at the end of the season, that number might fall, and we may have created artificial and unrealistic expectations.
And I think
starting up here too high.
I think for AMAA, it's a little different because you guys see each other in the same groups week after week, and the competitions are back to back to back to back.
Yes, they are.
There's 3 weekends and 5 shows, and it's all together all the time. I do think that's something that I've noticed looking at recaps relative to the circuit is the value of the 10th and what's expected for the high versus the low part of the groupings is like, one judge may think that they're 4 tenths apart, and one judge may think that they're 17 tenths apart. And then that judge is essentially calling the show by putting such a big spread in one caption. And I think that that could be a place where there's discussion of what does the high end of our category look like and what does the low end look like, so it doesn't have such a variety in the value of the 10th of, yeah, there are going to be significant differences from your highest group to your middle group to your lowest group, but there should never probably be a time where one group is first one weekend in movement and the next weekend they're 4th, and it calls the entire show and puts the entire group in 3rd, is what I've kind of experienced.
Oh yeah, it's happened. Yeah.
So it is possible. Like box 4 is almost 3 points wide in a subcaption. And so it is possible that you may deliver the same information using some of the same words and have a full point between units in the same box 3rd. Like we have a really wide range of scoring options that has the same language. And so that is an evaluative tool that you have the option to keep them as close as you need to if the language allows you to do that. And so this is really a commentary issue. Your commentary will drive that.
Yeah.
What other questions do you have?
I'd have a follow-up to that, because I think we're zoning in on something really important, and it's this concept of spreads. And I agree, Nadine, like a class might only have 3 or 4 units in them. And so maybe a more general question, as we're looking at how to calibrate the value of a 10th with those large spreads between judges, and that to that point with Heather, what should judges be working on, or what should we be investing to calibrate what that value is? Is that about commentary, as I think you might have just mentioned, or where should we really focus to get that calibration across all of the judges in the circuit?
Well, what is the difference what is the difference between excellent and good? That's a question that you as a judging community, you have to ask. And the sheet gives us that. There's language for excellent and good and moderate and broad. The answer comes from the sheet. Look at the sheet and find the language. In fact, on my own personal tools that I develop for different captions, I have boxes with the appropriate words all the way down the sheet. And if I want to say, if I find that I'm saying that something is moderate and pedestrian, I look at the sheet and find where that exists. And then I know for that bullet point in that moment, I know where I have to put that number. And then that aggregate of numbers at the end of the show drives my evaluation. So, like I said, your experience in the activity should give you an indication of what the differences are based on the descriptions on the sheet. That's why we can't get just anybody to do this. It has to be somebody who kind of knows what good performance looks like, what the appropriate skill looks like. I value Curtis Costanza a couple of years ago threw shade at most of the judging community, and he said that if you can't judge equipment, why are you judging color guard? And I took that personally. I was like, I have taught, I have written, and I do know how this works. I do know my way around the equipment. And that's really what drove me to try to judge equipment, to express what I think I already know. And it has gone well. I've reminded myself of so much that I once knew by experiencing it through the sheets, that it has made me better in a lot of different ways. So draw on your experience about what these descriptive words look like. Know which descriptive words fit in which boxes and which box thirds you think they fit in. And that way, when you judge, your language, your recognition of what the unit is doing will drive your scoring. And it just may be a reality that certain units have deficiencies in certain captions. And as professionals, we do have to recognize that. We cannot artificially keep the score close so that people feel better.
Yeah.
And I know, Keith, you mentioned that we can share some of your commentary from past tapes just to hear like
Yeah.
samples of. Yes.
You can poke me with a stick and remind me to send that.
I shall poke.
I think the key here for us here in Alberta is just really fostering this training, and especially for the new era of judges coming in and really understanding how the sheets work in relation to the scoring. Because I think that's kind of where it gets wishy-washy. People are more just really focused on really what's happening on the floor and not putting it in relation to a sheet. And they're just kind of going show to show saying, okay, well, the person that did GE last week gave them a 74. So I got to be sure to kind of stay in that zone, and just kind of relying on this. Yeah, I can't even express the right words for it, but I think it's just the consistency in the training from judges, and it's just a matter of this community. We just pull together and we help each other out. We want to learn and we want to support each other. And the number one thing is we all want these groups to grow and be successful. And I think that's our number one job here. But yeah, that's just kind of where I'm leaning at as one of the, I won't say a veteran judge, but I'm definitely the oldest on the panel. I've been there since, done that and seen a lot. And that's just kind of my take on it is, if we need to rely on the sheets and start using the sheets as our basis and then going from there and build the blocks from there, then that's what everybody kind of needs to be consistent and do right from show number one.
Keith and Kent, can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Nadine. I'm going to share something really quick. Can we see this? Okay. So kind of like Kent and Keith have been saying, our commentary is going to drive where the score goes. So if
Yeah.
if we're familiar, and this is not just for you, Nadine, this is everybody, but
Yeah.
if we're familiar with the wordage and the keywords and the buzzwords within our caption and our categories, what we then do is we go, okay, like I'll use the example Keith said, I say sometimes a lot. Okay. So I say sometimes a lot, and I probably said it more than I didn't. So they're going to be in this 30 range. And then I come down to the subcaption spread guidelines, which is the power of the 10th that Kent and Keith were talking about. That's exactly what this is here. And then we go, okay, well, band one, if two bands were in that 30s, then I start to use this. And what it does is it pinpoints us down from just selecting a random number to I
Yeah.
get into a box, I get them into a triad, and then I get them into the value of the 10th, and then I should find out where I'm going from there. Is, kind of how the sheet can be used to help us guide where we're going. And then we see where the
Yeah.
similarities and differences are with the groups that we're comparing and contrasting.
Yeah.
One of the last tools you can use as you make a commentary is your wrap up. The wrap up is where you say the things that you've said that are meaningful, and they'll remind you of where you've placed those numbers. I know it's a time sensitive event. You don't want to make too long a wrap up because you've got to put your score in relation to all the others and get ready for the next team. But that wrap up is one of the most important things you can consider.
And Kent, sorry, I'm going to jump in one more time. Never say something in your wrap up that you haven't said the whole tape. Like
100%.
don't get to your wrap up and go, yeah, we had a lot of timing problems, and you didn't talk about timing at all in the whole tape because you can't justify where those were. You're just opening up a can of worms. So make sure that your commentary at the end is a good summary of what you said. Yeah.
I don't like to say what you shouldn't say because that's a vast area. But don't say you like or dislike anything. We aren't paid to like or dislike anything. We're paid to analyze what's there.
Sorry,
To
just
react
a
with you on GE.
quick question to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So like going back to the sheet that John just spoke on and like the different sections and then going down to the sub captions. So you're kind of analyzing each group individually, and then are you guys waiting until the end of like a class or a grouping to then, once you've analyzed those going in and scoring them, or are you scoring that group right in that moment? And then to your point, the ranking and everything will work itself out.
In the last note of the performance, when the audience is applauding, I know what the number is because I've spoken it over time. I
But I
know
like the question because sometimes I'll put it in my tote sheet, but not in competition suite. That way I give myself room to change it easily.
Okay. What, as like a very junior judge, what would you recommend is like a good practice to know that you're hitting that triad correctly and like making sure that you're not skewing those numbers and kind of getting used to how you're analyzing that?
it is too challenging. I don't know anyone who can wait till the end of a round and then put all the numbers down. You must score as you go. That way, the impression that and the analysis and the comparison that you went through during the show is there on paper. At the end of the round, Competition Suite is a wonderful tool. What a great benefit it has been for our judging community. We're able to adjust those numbers at the end if you feel like that's appropriate. But I feel like it's critically important to have a number put down somewhere so that you know what you were thinking in that moment. That moment when the show has just finished, that's the critical moment.
There will come a part of the day where you won't be able to remember the team that came before you. And we haven't talked about taking notes, but taking notes is crucial for that sort of global memory of time. Even if you just draw a picture of the show, draw a quick uniform, just take, a lot of people take a picture. They have computer programs that they type into while they're talking. Well, I can't do that. There's no chance I could do that. But take notes.
Does everybody here know what a tote sheet is? I mean, that's another thing I don't know if we've used in the past or not, but just to make sure that we all know what a tote sheet is. So a tote sheet is basically kind of a grid that we'll use throughout the day where we put the band's names, and it's got the sub captions and then the total score. So we can kind of see where things are laying out as the day goes on. And then as you're starting to feel comfortable with things on the tote sheet, you can start to move it over to comp suite. Yeah.
And everybody uses a different kind of a tote sheet. Some
Yep.
people like it, and it doesn't matter what kind it is. You use what you like. I have a reference grid that is good, that I made, that I like. I made my own tote sheet just because it works for me. The tools that other people use may not work for you. Make sure that your process is good for you.
Yep. And
I
will.
you go ahead and put all the numbers in, and then just don't
verify.
Yeah, till the end.
Yeah, and we will have tote sheets to all the judges as we go out this year, and it'll be something I'll explain. But yeah, so the judges will have those this year.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Any other questions? Before we go, I'd like to talk about the expectations that WGI has for the different classifications. I would not mention on taped commentary whether or not a unit is classified appropriately. That's the kind of conversation you have with the circuit managers after a show. But the expectations this year are defined specifically. Regional A is beginning skills. The A class is intermediate skills. The open class is advanced skills. And the world class is standard setting and virtuosic. And so, we've probably misunderstood the A class for several years. A has grown beyond our descriptions. This year, it's intermediate, and that's just what reality is. And we finally are able to recognize that on the sheets and in our tape commentary, that the expectations for A class is intermediate skills. And there's another hour of discussing what the difference is between beginning, intermediate, and advanced. But by all means, find a design partner and just talk about it. What do you think it means?
Want to leave room for any additional questions. I've made some notes as we've been chatting, and my biggest takeaway, sort of thinking about the circuit overall, and I really like the messaging, is focusing on the commentary. And if I'm practicing a skill as a judge, focusing on having a really strong commentary. And I think as I'm not a judge, but as a consumer of the tapes, like that's a lot of what our units are interested in, is having that really great commentary, as we can then as a circuit work on how the numbers come out of that commentary. It sounds like, from your advice, step one is focus on the quality of that commentary. If that's of high quality, then the numbers can start to be of high quality as well.
Perfect.
And so maybe just one last question, and it's probably a repetition of some items, but like, what are some of the best strategies for judges to work on the quality of that commentary?
Everybody's got their own process. I know for me, it involved a lot of written construction of sentences. I listened to my own commentary. I recognized where I wasn't describing what I was seeing correctly, or at least with the kind of specificity that the unit needed, or that would drive my scoring. And so I would rewrite the sentence that I should have said in that moment. And the more you refine your language, it's hard for us to practice outside of the actual practice of judging. And that's why for me, if I write something down, I remember it. That's just how my memory works.
Well, I live in Washington, D.C., and we have a lot of museums. We have a lot of art exhibits. When we go to things like that, we find ourselves in a judge mindset, because judging art seems self-defeating, because art is subjective. But we have bias. Know your bias. Know the things you like, and don't value them because you like them. Value them because they're constructed well. Like, we have to know who we are. and what we favor in art, not just in color guard, but in the world around us. Knowing your bias is crucial.
Yeah, and Josh, I do have an exercise for that for judges that would like to work on that before the season starts. Courtney went through it last year, and I did it a couple times in the summer as well. So
Awesome. Any other final questions?
Oh, and by the way, you can email us or call us in the middle of the season. We want to talk about color guard all the time.
I'm retired. I've got nothing to do but paint, write music.
Alyssa.
So I just had a question around design versus performance. How do you know kind of that line between the design, like the performers are above the design versus it's been written to their skill and they've executed it?
Well, if you have the experience of teaching a unit, that moment where you feel like it's good enough, that's when they're equal.
Let's describe in equipment, sometimes you'll see an awkward grip shift or an awkward change of direction that doesn't flow well. We use the word flow deliberately. We know that that's not ergonomic for the students. Sometimes they'll have a change in orientation, then a reverse change in orientation that just serves to make them dizzy. So just knowing what you see when you see it is very hard to teach people because we all come from so many different backgrounds. But the more you do it, better you get.
And so if you recognize that the design has a problem, then it may be a moment where the performers are over the written work. Challenge yourself. Find at least one example in your experience in a weekend where you can put the performers over the written work. And it doesn't have to be every week, but start considering how that might be possible.
Just as we're supposed to judge the purposeful use of the elements of design, we have to be purposeful in our use of profiling.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Keith and Kent, so much for spending time with us here in our circuit up here in Alberta. And I can speak for everyone. This is such valuable time for us to come together and getting both of your really expert perspective and you really do this at a volume that up here not a lot of us get to see it all. And so we really very much appreciate that and appreciate Heather. Thank you for bringing us Keith and Kent up here. And I know that we'll be sharing this recording to our entire slate of judges for the season as well. We have a whole bunch of folks that have signed up to be in training, which is a big part of our growth over time. Is we want to accept lots of folks in training so that we can continue to home grow high quality judges up here in Alberta, and then at the same time bring in great judges from other areas as well. And so thank you so much for your time and for spending it with us.
You're welcome. This was fun.